starting for Peter's door. "It's Miep!" She knocks at the door. "Father!" Mr. Frank comes quickly from Peter's room. "Thank you, Margot," as he goes down the steps to open the outer door. "Has everyone his list?" "I'll get my books," giving her mother a list. "Here's your list." Margot goes into her and Anne's bedroom on the right. Anne sits up, hiding her tears, as Margot comes in. "Miep's here." Margot picks up her books and goes back. Anne hurries over to the mirror, smoothing her hair. "Is it Miep?" "Yes. Father's gone down to let her in." "At last I'll have some cigarettes." To Mr. Van Daan. "I can't tell you how unhappy I am about Mrs. Van Daan's coat. Anne should never have touched it." "She'll be all right." "Is there anything I can do?" "Don't worry." He turns to meet Miep, but it is not Miep who comes up the steps. It is Mr. Kraler, followed by Mr. Frank. Their faces are grave. Anne comes from the bedroom. Peter comes from his room. "Mr. Kraler!" "How are you, Mr. Kraler?" "This is a surprise." When Mr. Kraler comes, the sun begins to shine. "Miep is coming?" "Not tonight." Kraler goes to Margot and Mrs. Frank and Anne, shaking hands with them. "Wouldn't you like a cup of coffee? Or better still, will you have supper with us?" "Mr. Kraler has something to talk over with us. Something has happened," he says, "which demands an immediate decision." "What is it?" Mr. Kraler sits down on the couch. As he talks, he takes bread, cabbages, milk, etc. from his briefcase, giving them to Margot and Anne to put away. "Usually when I come up here, I try to bring you some bit of good news. What's the use of telling you the bad news when there's nothing that you can do about it? But today something has happened. Dirk, Miep's Dirk, you know, came to me just now. He tells me that he has a Jewish friend living near him, a dentist. He says he's in trouble. He begged me, could I do anything for this man? Could I find him a hiding place? So I've come to you. I know it's a terrible thing to ask of you, living as you are, but would you take him in with you?" "Of course we will. It'll be just for a night or two, until I find some other place. This happened so suddenly that I didn't know where to turn." "Where is he?" "Downstairs in the office." "Good, bring him up. His name is Dussel. John Dussel." "Dussel? I think I know him." "I'll get him." He goes quickly down the steps and out. Mr. Frank suddenly becomes conscious of the others. "Forgive me, I spoke without consulting you, but I knew you'd feel as I do." "There's no reason for you to consult anyone. This is your place. You have a right to do exactly as you please. The only thing I feel, there's so little food as it is, and to take in another person—" Peter turns away, ashamed of his father. "We can stretch the food a little. It's only for a few days. You want to make a bet?" "I think it's fine to have him. But, Otto, where are you going to put him? Where?" "He can have my bed. I can sleep on the floor. I wouldn't mind." "That's good of you, Peter, but your room's too small, even for you." "I have a much better idea. I'll come in here with you and Mother, and Margot can take Peter's room, and Peter can go in our room with Mr. Dussel." "That's right. We could do that." "No, Margot, you mustn't sleep in that room. Neither you nor Anne. Moushy has caught some rats in there. Peter's brave. He doesn't mind." "Then how about this? I'll come in here with you and Mother, and Mr. Dussel can have my bed." "No, no, no! Margot will come in here with us, and he can have her bed. It's the only way. Margot, bring your things in here. Help her, Anne." Margot hurries into her room to get her things. "Why Margot? Why can't I come in here?" "Because it wouldn't be proper for Margot to sleep with a—" "Please, Anne, don't argue, please." Anne starts slowly away. "You don't mind sharing your room with Mr. Dussel, do you, Anne?" "No, no, of course not." "Good." Anne goes off into her bedroom, helping Margot. Mr. Frank starts to search in the cupboards. "Where's the cognac?" "It's there. But, Otto, I was saving it in case of illness." "I think we couldn't find a better time to use it. Peter, will you get 5 glasses for me?" Peter goes for the glasses. Margot comes out of her bedroom, carrying her possessions, which she hangs behind a curtain in the main room. Mr. Frank finds the cognac and pours it into the 5 glasses that Peter brings him. Mr. Van Daan stands looking on sourly. Mrs. Van Daan comes downstairs and looks around at all the bustle. "What's happening? What's going on?" "Someone's moving in with us." "In here? You're joking." "It's only for a night or two, until Mr. Kraler finds him another place." Yeah. Mr. Frank hurries over as Mr. Kraler and Dussel come up. Dussel's a man in his late 50s, meticulous, finicky, bewildered now. He wears a raincoat. He carries a briefcase, stuffed full, and a small medicine case. "Come in, Mr. Dussel." "This is Mr. Frank." "Mr. Otto Frank?" "Yes. Let me take your things." He takes the hat and briefcase, but Dussel clings to his medicine case. This is my wife, Edith, Mr. and Mrs. Von Don, their son, Peter, and my daughters, Margot and Anne. Dussel shakes hands with everyone. Thank you, Mr. Frank. Thank you all. Mr. Dussel, I leave you in good hands. Oh, Dirk's coat. Dussel hurriedly takes off the raincoat, giving it to Mr. Kraler. Underneath is his white dentist jacket with a yellow Star of David on it. To Mr. Kraler, what can I say to thank you? To Dussel, Mr. Kraler and Miep, they're our lifeline. Without them, we couldn't live. Please, please, you make us seem very heroic. It isn't that at all. We simply don't like the Nazis. To Mr. Frank, who offers him a drink, no thanks. Then going on, we don't like their methods. We don't like... I know. No one's going to tell us Dutchmen what to do with our damn Jews. Pay no attention to Mr. Frank. I'll be up tomorrow to see that they're treating you right. Don't trouble to come down again. Peter will bolt the door after me, won't you, Peter? Yes, sir. Thank you, Peter. I'll do it. Good night. Good night. Good night, Mr. Kraler. We'll see you tomorrow, etc., etc. Mr. Kraler goes out with Mr. Frank. Mrs. Frank gives each one of the grown-ups a glass of cognac. Please, Mr. Dussel, sit down. Mr. Dussel sinks into a chair. Mrs. Frank gives him a glass of cognac. I'm dreaming. I know it. I can't believe my eyes. Mr. Otto. Frank here. You were not in Switzerland, then? A woman told me. She said she'd gone to your house. The door was open. Everything was in disorder. Dishes in the sink. She said she found a piece of paper in the wastebasket with an address scribbled on it, an address in Zurich. She said you must have escaped to Zurich. Father put that there purposely, just so people would think that very thing. And you've been here all the time? All the time, ever since July. Anne speaks to her father as he comes back. It worked, Pim. The address you left. Mr. Dussel says that people believe we escaped to Switzerland. I'm glad. And now let's have a little drink to welcome Mr. Dussel. Before they drink, Mr. Dussel bolts his drink. Mr. Frank smiles and raises his glass. To Mr. Dussel, welcome. We're very honored to have you with us. To Mr. Dussel, welcome. The Von Dons murmur a welcome. The grown-ups drink. That was good. Did Mr. Kraler warn you that you won't get much to eat here? You can imagine, 3 ration books among the 7 of us, and now you make 8? Peter walks away, humiliated. Outside, a street organ is heard dimly. Mr. Von Don, you don't realize what is happening outside that you should warn me of a thing like that. You don't realize what's going on. As Mr. Von Don starts his characteristic pacing, Dussel turns to speak to the others. Right here in Amsterdam, every day, hundreds of Jews disappear. They surround a block and search house by house. Children come home from school to find their parents gone. Hundreds are being deported. People that you and I know, the Hallensteins, the Wessels. Oh, no! They get their call-up notice. Come to the Jewish theater on such and such a day and hour. Bring only what you can carry in a rucksack. And if you refuse the call-up notice, then they come and drag you from your home and ship you off to Mauthausen, the death camp. We didn't know that things had got so much worse. Forgive me for speaking so. Do you know the Duvals? What's become of them? Their daughter, Hopi, and I are in the same class. Hopi is my best friend. They are gone. Gone? With all the others. Oh, no, not Hopi. She turns away in tears. Mrs. Frank motions to Margot to comfort her. Margot goes to Anne, putting her arms comfortingly around her. There were some people called Wagner. They lived near us? Mr. Frank's interrupting with a glance at Anne. I think we should put this off until later. We all have many questions we want to ask, but I'm sure that Mr. Dussel would like to get settled before supper. Thank you, I would. I brought very little with me. Given him his hat and briefcase. I'm sorry we can't give you a room alone, but I hope you won't be too uncomfortable. We've had to make strict rules here, a schedule of hours. We'll tell you after supper. Anne, would you like to take Mr. Dussel to his room? Controlling her tears. If you'll come with me, Mr. Dussel. She starts for her room. Shaking hands with each in turn. Forgive me if I haven't really expressed my gratitude to all of you. This has been such a shock to me. I'd always thought of myself as Dutch. I was born in Holland. My father was born in Holland, and my grandfather. And now, after all these years, he breaks off, if you'll excuse me. Dussel gives a little bow and hurries off after Anne. Mr. Frank and the others are subdued. Turning on the light. Well, here we are. Dussel looks around the room. In the main room, Margot speaks to her mother. The news sounds pretty bad, doesn't it? It's so different from what Mr. Kraler tells us. Mr. Kraler says things are improving. I like it better the way Kraler tells it. They resume their occupations quietly. Peter goes off into his room. In Anne's room, Anne turns to Dussel. You're going to share the room with me. I'm a man who's always lived alone. I haven't had to adjust myself to others. I hope you'll bear with me until I learn. Let me help you. She takes his briefcase. Do you always live all alone? Have you no family at all? No one. He opens his medicine case and spreads his bottles on the dressing table. How dreadful. You must be terribly lonely. I'm used to it. I don't think I could ever get used to it. Didn't you even have a pet? A cat or a dog? I have an allergy for fur-bearing animals. They give me asthma. Oh dear, Peter has a cat. Here? He has it here? Yes, but we hardly ever see it. He keeps it in his room all the time. I'm sure it'll be all right. Let us hope so. He takes some pills to fortify himself. That's Margot's bed, where you're going to sleep. I sleep on the sofa there, indicating the clothes hooks on the wall. We cleared these off for your things. She goes over to the window. The best part about this room, you can look down and see a bit of the street and the canal. There's a houseboat. You can see the end of it. A bargeman lives there with his family. They have a baby, and he's just beginning to walk, and I'm so afraid he's going to fall into the canal someday. I watch him. Your father spoke of a schedule. Oh yes, it's mostly about the times we have to be quiet, and times for the WC. You can use it now if you like. No, thank you. I suppose you think it's awful, my talking about a thing like that, but you don't know how important it can get to be, especially when you're frightened. About this room, the way Margot and I did, she had it to herself in the afternoons for studying, reading, lessons, you know, and I took the mornings. Would that be all right with you? I'm not at my best in the morning. You stay here in the mornings, then. I'll take the room in the afternoons. Tell me, when you're in here, what happens to me? Where am I spending my time? In there, with all the people? Yes. I see. We have supper at 6:30. Then, if you don't mind, I like to lie down quietly for 10 minutes before eating. I find it helps the digestion. Of course. I hope I'm not going to be too much of a bother to you. I seem to be able to get everyone's back up. Dussel lies down on the sofa, curled up, his back to her. I always get along very well with children. My patients all bring their children to me, because they know I get on well with them, so don't you worry about that. Anne leans over him, taking his hand and shaking it gratefully. Thank you, Mr. Dussel. The lights dim to darkness. The curtain falls on the scene. Anne's voice comes to us faintly at first, and then with increasing power. And yesterday, I finished Sissy van Marksvelt's latest book. I think she is a first-class writer. I shall definitely let my children read her. Monday, the 21st of September, 1942. Mr. Dussel and I had another battle yesterday. Yes, Mr. Dussel. According to him, nothing, I repeat, nothing is right about me. My appearance, my character, my manners. While he was going on at me, I thought, sometime I'll give you such a smack that you'll fly right up to the ceiling. Why is it that every grown-up thinks he knows the way to bring up children, particularly the grown-ups that never had any? I keep wishing that Peter was a girl instead of a boy, then I would have someone to talk to. Margot's a darling, but she takes everything too seriously. To pause for a moment on the subject of Mrs. Von Don, I must tell you that her attempts to flirt with Father are getting her nowhere. Pym, thank goodness, won't play. As she is saying the last lines, the curtain rises on the darkened scene. Anne's voice fades out. Scene 4. It is the middle of the night, several months later. The stage is dark except for a little light which comes through the skylight in Peter's room. Everyone is in bed. Mr. and Mrs. Frank lie on the couch in the main room, which has been pulled out to serve as a makeshift double bed. Margot is sleeping on a mattress on the floor in the main room, behind a curtain stretched across for privacy. The others are all in their accustomed rooms. From outside we hear 2 drunken soldiers singing Lily Marlene. A girl's high giggle is heard. The sound of running feet is heard coming closer and then fading in the distance. Throughout the scene there is the distant sound of airplanes passing overhead. A match suddenly flares up in the attic. We dimly see Mr. Von Don. He is getting his bearings. He comes quickly down the stairs and goes to the cupboard where the food is stored. Again the match flares up and is as quickly blown out. The dim figure is seen to steal back up the stairs. There is quiet for a second or two, broken only by the sound of airplanes and running feet on the street below. Suddenly, out of the silence and the dark, we hear Anne scream.